right, welcome everybody to a rather depressing episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Orick, here with Bob Rose. You know, I'm not going to call this the most frustrating loss I've ever watched because clearly, games like the 2018 NFC Championship game, 1983, Mike Lansford kicking that field goal to kick the Saints out of the playoffs. And denying them a winning season. Atlanta losing, the Saints losing to Atlanta in 79 opening day. Um, Especially after the two back-to-back losses in 78, 20-17 in the last play of the game, to lose once again in the last play of the game. Those are frustrating losses. In many ways, this game reminded me of another December game from 1979, the Oakland Raiders Monday Night Football game.
And that's exactly what I was thinking in the fourth quarter, too.
Yeah. Because the Saints are up 35-14. They are playing probably some of their best football, against a Monday night legend, because the Raiders in the 70s were, it's John Madden, it's Ken Stabler, it's all those Hall of Famers. The Raiders were unbeatable on Monday night. They had an incredible record on Monday Night Football. So, watching this thing unravel the way it did, it was very reminiscent of that game because the Saints unraveled. They get up 35-14 in middle of the third quarter. And then the Raiders start their comeback, and the Saints have no answer. It's at what point did you feel this game was over?
As soon as they got in the end zone on their first touchdown to make it 16-10, because I knew by that point that the coaches, and I realized that the coaches are taking tons and tons of heat, and they should, but I knew that the coaches were not going to be aggressive on the following offensive drive. And if you've ever watched a Tom Brady football game in the fourth quarter, you know that if he doesn't beat you, then the referees will help him beat you. So as soon as they made it 16-10, I knew that the Saints would lose this game. As a matter of fact, I started tearing shit up at that point. You'll see behind me. I don't know how much of my collectibles I have left. I haven't had the heart to look. I just covered everything over with a towel. I'll look in a day or two. But yeah, I went batshit.
Well,
I didn't javelin a Christmas tree like I did during a certain Denver Bronco game in the late 90s. Our Christmas tree is still intact, mainly because I didn't want to deal with the family fallout when they woke up. But yeah, the collectibles, they took a hit, folks.
Well, I
get down.
The frustrating thing for me is, and I felt this game would have been over for the Bucs on the drive where they had to settle for a field goal to make it 16.
Yeah.
The 12 men in the huddle, that penalty, which I thought that was an example of difference between Drew Brees and Andy Dalton. Drew always stood outside the huddle, counted, because they were constantly shifting people back and forth, and they would get 12 men in the huddle. But Drew never stepped into the huddle so he could get somebody out of there. Andy didn't do it this time, was focused on getting the next play in, and got in the huddle, and it was immediately 12 men, and you go from 3rd and 2 to 3rd and 7 on that play. Because I kept saying, they make this 20-3, and this game is over. There's not enough time to score that many points and win. John Sigler was on Twitter during the end of the game trying to defend Mark Ingram for not extending the ball because he had a bad knee. And some people were saying, well, why was he even out there if he had a bad knee? Why didn't you run Kamara on that route? My only issue with Kamara was the Bucks were clearly focused on Kamara. Every time he touched the ball, they were all over him. The sack was a swing pass to Kamara.
Yeah.
And they were in the middle of that play.
But Alan, it was one of only 4 pass patterns that Alvin Kamara ran all night. I counted 4 legitimate pass routes. So it's the fault of the coaching staff for not trying to get him in the open field. Yeah, they gave him the ball as a runner, but you're right. The Buccaneers were so focused on him. And rightfully so. He is their best weapon. Whether he wants to be there or not is a different story. But he is their best weapon. That sack was on Kamara. But the Saints coaching staff just didn't use him properly again.
And I think it's because you don't have a legitimate second running back. I mean, Ingram is playing on bad wheels. So you're using Kamara improperly as a running. You're using him as a running back to try and run between the tackles because Levante David and Devin White are so fast to the edges. You can't get outside on that team. So you have to run between the tackles. That's what the Browns did last week with Nick Chubb. But Kamara's not Nick Chubb.
Right.
And so, the only power runner they got, unfortunately, is Taysom Hill. So let's go through the horrible nightmare of that second to last series for the Saints. That counted. Ingram goes 9 yards, doesn't extend the ball, gets out of bounds. Okay. It's now 3rd and 1. They try running a pass play to Marquez Callaway, whose reputation is he's got the strongest hands in the team.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a big-bodied receiver. My problem with that call is you look at that defense was not buying that. They were all bunched in. That cornerback was sitting within 3 yards.
Mm-hmm.
You should have audibilized out of that play. I'll call timeout, take Dalton out, put Taysom in. Because if you're still going to run the play, you have a chance they're going to bite on Taysom running the football. They're not biting on Andy running the football.
No.
My second complaint, and I get the thinking because it's a close game and you're playing field position. If you're going to throw the ball on 3rd down, why not go for it on 4th down? I saw a stat today. It said the Saints on 4th and short have gone for it 0 times this season. Sean Payton went for it 20 of 23 times. In fact, I even thought they were going to run a fake punt at one point, on those 4th and shorts. And I felt like Dennis Allen coached scared.
All year. All year he has.
Yeah, and coached so conservative. Carl Smith was running this team, and this was a game where you're playing with house money, essentially. Why not leave it out on the field? I took every chance I could. I'm not surprised. And to Ingram's credit, he did come out and apologize and took the blame, faced the media about it. But yeah, that the game is on the line. You've got to make that. You've got to make that 1st down. That's all that's important. Just extend the ball out. The worst thing could happen is he's going to knock the ball from your hand and it hits out of bounds.
Yep.
Stick the ball out.
Or lower your shoulder and dive. I get that he had an injured knee and was dealing with that. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't tell me, that doesn't give me a good enough reason why you ran out of bounds. I'd have been better off, slightly better off, if he would have just slid, gave himself up like a quarterback would have. But I mean, he didn't even do that. And it's plays like that have been made all year long by established veteran players. Players like James Hurst or Ryan Ramczyk jumping off sides, in a 3rd and short or a goal line situation. Players like Marcus Davenport, David Onyemata, jumping off sides. I misspoke. I meant to say false starting with the offensive lineman. But Onyemata, Davenport jumping off sides, or Tyrann Mathieu or Marcus May lining up off sides. These aren't rookies. Those mistakes are difficult to deal. Difficult enough to stomach with. If you're talking about, excuse me, Olave, Shaheed, Alante, even Penny, those are rookies. Still playing football since they were wee little, so should know better. But they're a little bit easier to explain. These are established friggin' veterans that are making these plays, and it points to the lack of discipline. And everybody's going to blame the coaches for this too, folks. These are grown men. These are grown men. It's not the coaches that are forcing them to jump off sides or commit stupid ass penalties, in such crucial situations. And for that, the finger of blame points directly to them.
Yeah. Alvin Kamara, I felt, was running scared. He was running like a guy who's worried about fumbling the ball. And I've said this before. These guys have won. They know how to win. They've been in these situations before plenty of times. How can they have these continual mental breakdowns, dropping passes, not paying attention where the sticks are, coming up just short so it's not an easy first down, allowing receivers to get out of bounds in a 2-minute drill? When they have one timeout. They have one timeout left. They never used it.
That's right. They didn't. Wow.
That's what was so galling to me. They never used it because they never got behind in the down and distance. The only penalty they got on the whole drive was they called a touchdown pass back.
Right.
It's just inconceivable. Where they're going with this ball. Keep them in bounds, tackle them in bounds. Run clock. The clock is your friend. They're the desperate ones, but you allowed them to go down the field at their pace, not yours. It was mind-boggling how easily they let them get these first downs and get these little dump-off passes. There was nothing deep. These were all short passes. You tackle them inbounds. As soon as they touch the ball, you're on them. They go down. It's now, instead of 2nd and 1, it's 2nd and 7.
Yep.
They try to throw another short pass, you knock the ball down. You don't have to sack Brady, but you have to make incompletions. I mean, that's so. As frustrating as the offense was, the defense just as frustrating, because it's like, don't you understand the situation? How did Penning do? Penning did okay. They put him in jumbo packages.
Yeah.
So I think he was the 12th man in the line of scrimmage, though. I think he was the 12th man in the huddle, because I think they were unsure if they were going to go jumbo, and he didn't hear the change. And again, like I said, Dalton didn't stand outside the huddle and wave him in or out, because I saw him go in and out a couple of times. They weren't sure if they were going jumbo or not.
Right.
Especially in short yardage. But yeah, it's that kind of stuff, and it has been that way all year. It hasn't been just, it's just this game. And it feels like they wasted another good game from Andy Dalton. Dalton had a good game last
He did.
week, believe it or not. You know, he went 20 of 28, you know, against that Bucks defense.
And he was money on a
Yeah.
lot of third and middle and third and long situations. I mean, yeah, you're not going to win a Super Bowl with Andy Dalton, but you can win games with Andy Dalton. This was a game that should have been won. Or let me rephrase, because I'm so sick of the should haves. It was a game that was not lost because of Andy Dalton.
Right. You know, and immediately I think some reporter asked if he's going to make a quarterback change. And I'm like, okay, to make a quarterback change, is now Winston going to make these guys drop passes harder?
Right.
It's basically it is, you know, how is a quarterback change going 20 of 28? You know, how is a quarterback change going to make a difference? Okay, yeah, they suck in the red zone. All right, why do they suck in the red zone? Well, they can't run the football for one. So now the receivers are in a much tighter area. It's harder to do anything. So how is Winston being there going to make a difference in that situation? Is he going to throw the ball harder and faster? The receivers aren't catching the ball. That's part of the reason why they stink in the red zone.
Right.
You know, it's if it was just a situation, I think that Andy Dalton is just not hitting receivers. He can't push the ball downfield. He's got terrible stats. He's going, I don't know, 9 of 18 or 9 of 21. I can justify that argument that, yeah, Andy Dalton's the problem. It's not Andy Dalton that's the problem. The problem is receivers dropping balls. You can't run the football. You're not converting. They only have 14 first downs to Tampa Bay's 25 yesterday. They were 5 of 14 on third down. You know, whereas Tampa was like 8 of 16. You know, or 8 of 15. So they were over 50%. You know, that's the problems. And it's not the same guys. It's different guys each game making the mistakes. You know, last week was Kamara fumbling twice, and one of them took a score off the board. You know, this week, you know, and last week was Olave dropping a pass. This week, Olave drops a pass. Landry drops an easier touchdown.
Yeah.
A walk-in touchdown. You know, Ingram goes short on the sticks. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, well, I'll bench the guy that's giving me problems. Who are you going to replace him with? You're running out of bodies. I mean, yeah.
I mean, apparently they'll find somebody because there's somebody that could do an equally bad job. Because on the last New Orleans drive, and the shit that I didn't destroy on my first wave of rage, I had 3 waves of rage. This brought on my second wave, even before Nassib's sack to set up that third and long. I watched Olave, Shaheed, and Landry all come off the field, and then they drop back to pass. And it was a coverage sack. You know, Andy had, I think, 3 seconds to throw before Nassib got him. Well, no shit, it's going to be a coverage sack because who you running in the pass routes?
Yeah.
It's not Kamara. We already said you have 5 routes all night long. Olave, Landry, and Shaheed had a hell of a game. All out.
He did.
And you expect to make a play. And what's that do? That sets you up for a 3rd and 17. And I actually heard some people criticize Taysom, for dropping that pass. Listen, the throw was right on the money. The route was right straight down the seam. Taysom had his hands on it, and Keanu Neal, who has never covered a guy since middle school, made a very nice play in coverage.
Yeah, he hit him right where the ball was. He didn't hit him in the back. He didn't hit him on the arm. He put a hat on the ball and knocked it loose. Because you look at the slow motion, Taysom's got that ball, and he's coming down with it. And that, like you said, that was a hell of a throw. I understand. Calvin starting shit. Yeah, I know. Calvin Landry has not been good.
No.
You know, neither has the Honey Badger. I mean, Matthew we've talked about him several times. He has not been good either. And it's, a lot of people who say this is why Sean Payton never signed LSU players are having a field day, because, of course, you're not going to get Jamar Chase. You're not going to get Joe Burrow. You're not going to get Levante David, because those guys are studs for their team. So they're not going to give up those guys. You're getting old LSU players. So, I get the jokes and I laugh at them. But, yeah. Again, I know the thinking, okay? The thinking is we want to make it look like we're going to run the ball and we're going to surprise them with a pass. And on paper, that sounds good.
Yeah.
But now you're running Kirk Merritt, who is a Destrehan graduate. This is his first game active in the NFL, and you're playing against Tampa Bay. That's not, in the situation that you're in, that's not a good situation to try and run a play like that. Especially if you're going to tucking inside real close. I mean, the way the Buccaneer cornerbacks were playing, I talked about this earlier. The Buccaneers were playing 7, 8 guys within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. They were blitzing the shit out of Dalton, and Dalton was making them pay for it, because if he got the pass off and the receiver caught it, look at Troutman. Troutman got like 30 yards on a play because there was nobody left. So you were exploiting their defenses and making those guys back off. So I understand the thinking, but you don't have the players to execute that thinking. And right. I think that was the problem. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
exactly, yeah, Calvin. Exactly. They were running that. They were running that always successful triple tackle option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just like people asking, how come you're running Alvin Kamara up the middle on 1st and 10? So now 2nd and 9. Why are you running those things? Why are you doing the things dictating what the Bucs want to do? And again, I'm going to go back to, these are plays that probably look good in practice and were probably good ideas in theory, but you don't have the players to execute that.
Right.
You can run 1st and 10 if you've got Ingram in his prime or Latavius Murray in his prime back there doing that, or Deuce McAllister in his prime. You can do that. He's going to get 5 yards, so it's now 2nd and 5, and your playbook opens. You don't have that with Alvin Kamara. That's not Kamara's job. And I've said this before too. After quarterback, the most important position to get filled in this team is a running back. We need a between the tackles running back. That's when Kamara's at his best. That's when this offense, the way it's built, is at its best. Mm-hmm. This is clear when you drafted Penning and you got Ruiz at center. Did you notice him playing center yesterday?
I did, and I don't know whether he started the game. I'd have to go back. Well, I should go back and look. That's my job, but I'm not going to because I can't.
No, he did start. He started at center all game. They had Calvin Throckmorton in at guard, at left guard.
And truthfully, once McCoy went down, I was surprised they didn't do that anyway. I know Throckmorton hasn't played as consistently as he did last year, but he is still an upgrade over. He is still an upgrade over Josh Andrews. Mm-hmm. Andrews. God bless him. Andrews has played well for his limitations, but again, Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, put your best friggin' players out there. You moved to Ruiz has had a great season as far as I'm concerned, but you move Ruiz to center where he's a natural fit anyway, and you plug Throckmorton in at guard.
I think they wanted to be right-handed. I think they wanted to be right-handed and run behind Ruiz and Ramczyk.
Yeah.
And again, we'll go back to it. In theory, that sounds good, but in practice, it's not working because you're getting push up the middle because you're not getting that power out of the center.
Yep.
And I think, with Andrews being hurt, you had Pete there. They felt good running between Pete and Ruiz because that game also, and you saw it the week before, the longer James Hurst is out there, the more he's getting exposed.
Yes.
And I think, these last couple of games, he really looked bad. Ramczyk didn't have too good of a game.
Ramczyk hasn't had a good season.
No, he really hasn't. And I think that's a quiet thing that people have not been talking about. But I think we're going to suddenly notice next year, and I'm just speculating, because Ramczyk gets rest days every week. If Ramczyk decides to retire suddenly, now you have a right tackle issue.
Yep.
And we're going to go back and look at the season just like we looked at Max Unger's last season with the Saints and go, yeah, he really did badly. And it's just, there's things going on. I think we talked about this. Yeah, they need to run the ball because he's your power runner now. They stopped doing that. They were like 13 out of 13 doing that on 3rd and 1, running Taysom Hill, and they stopped doing it. Yeah, there's some stuff going on with some players. I think internally, not playing for the coach and not playing, but things that are going on where we're going, are they at the end of their career already? If they hit the wall. Some people are speculating that about Alvin Kamara. I don't think Kamara's hit the wall. I don't think he is at that point. I think the problem with Kamara is he needs that other running back.
He does, and something isn't right with him up here. I've said several times this season on your show and many others that Kamara to me looks like a disinterested player. And I'll include that last night. Folks, take the black and gold blinders off for a minute and watch Kamara. If you have Sunday Ticket or anything like that, and you can go back and watch even segments of games. I know most of these games are just too difficult to deal with from beginning to end to rewatch. Watch his body language during a play and even on the sidelines. The games that Kamara has excelled, they've gotten him involved as a receiver very early on. If they don't, he looks to me like he just checks out. Now, I'm not, none of us are in his head. So, anybody that wants to come at me and say, Bob, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, that might be true, but neither do you. I'm just reading what I see with my own eyes and, what I'm judging. As a coach myself, as someone who analyzes these games, and he just looks like a disinterested player and has all year.
I don't know if it's so much that, or is he just feels like, I'm thinking about what he said in the locker room way back earlier in the season after the Minnesota game and stuff, where he's like, we're getting too comfortable with losing. No, it was after the Bengals game, getting too comfortable with losing. That includes myself, and we're not that kind of team. And I think the void of leadership in that locker room, and there is a considerable void of leadership in that locker room where the players hold themselves accountable. Because you lost a lot of leadership. You lost Malcolm Jenkins.
Yeah.
You lost Marcus Williams. You lost Teron Armstead.
Yeah.
I think, and Drew Brees and Sean Payton's voice, that, they're looking for someone to step up and become a leader, and they're not seeing it. Demario Davis, he may be a leader, but he's not being vocal out there, where the fans can see that. Cameron Jordan, he's a leader, and he he also had a rant after that game. He was sickened by what happened in that game. Um, but I think that there are situations going on where they're still searching for their identity on
Clearly.
this team. Some people have basically equated this to um, the substitute teacher being in the classroom, because everything looks the same, but it's not the same because the real teacher's not in there. What was Robin Williams' character's name in Dead Poet Society? Um, I've drawn a blank on it.
Me too, and I love that movie.
But yeah, think about when that class came in, and Robin Williams has now been fired. The professor comes in to try and teach the class the way it's supposed to be taught, and they all stand at the desk and say, Captain, my captain," because of the way Robin Williams presented that literature and it came to life for them. It's almost like that. It's like Dennis Allen is trying to teach this group like you handle a group of professional veteran players, and they're not responding to him. They're playing for him. Don't get me wrong, they're not quitting on him, because clearly they're not quitting on him. But the motivation to get them to play beyond their ability is not happening, and that's the difference. Sean Payton, many times could get that. Yeah, CD Deuce, he had a presence on the field.
He did. You can't call him a leader though, Calvin. No. And I don't think the other players looked at him at that. I think with Gardner Johnson, I've always used the hockey analogy. He's the agitator. That doesn't necessarily start, but plays a lot of minutes. He gets under every other all opponents' skin. I don't think there's any denying that about CD Deuce. And he's just kind of a jolt to your entire team. When he's on the ice or when he's on the field. The team is missing that also. But they still have a lot of emotional players. So I agree with Alan. I don't think it's not that they're not playing for their coach or not playing for each other. It's just what leadership does is eliminate sloppiness, holds accountability for mistakes. Because even if you're playing hard and you make the same mistake over and over and over again, you kind of get into a rut up here. And that's when you need that leader to kind of, hypothetically speaking, kind of slap you across the face and cause you to refocus your energies. And that's what's not happening with this team.
Yeah. Bill Parcells used to talk a lot about how he would deliberately create tension with just irrational ranting, and here comes Lawrence Taylor, arguably the greatest defensive player of the 1980s, walking along the sideline after a series, and Parcells says nice and loud and looking at him saying, well, some of these guys need to get their head out their ass. And looking right at Lawrence Taylor, and it's might not even be Lawrence Taylor's problem. Might be Carl Banks, might be Harry Carson, could be anybody. But he knew that a mad Lawrence Taylor was a dangerous Lawrence Taylor on that field. I don't hear anything about an Ingram injury, John, until after the bye. They have a bye this week. It's probably a reoccurrence of that knee injury that he had earlier. And they're going to just try rest and see if he can play for the Atlanta game. Okay, I think we've done enough dissecting the problems of the Saints. Let's kind of spin it a little more positive, and talk about the guys who look like they had great games or good games, and kind of hope for the future. And you mentioned Rashid Shaheed, and we are seeing fans are aggravating me because they're like, well, he's not getting enough touches. It's coming. He's starting now. Landry's not starting.
Right.
It's Olave and Shaheed out there. So he's getting those touches. How do you like his growth so far as a receiver?
Oh man, I love it. And and I know you were one of the ones that was saying this too, and I was certainly echoing it. Those first couple weeks, when Shaheed's first 2 touches went for long touchdowns. That's when everybody was saying, he needs to get more touches. He was just getting his feet wet in the offense.
Mm-hmm.
As Shaheed has gotten more playing time, and I noticed this in the Pittsburgh game in particular because I was fortunate enough to have kind of a broader view of everything. I actually sat back at that debacle, and I found myself, because I gave up on watching what the offense did, but I focused on him when he was in the game, and I was like, this kid is actually a good route runner.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting to see that in the last couple of weeks. And he had, I think, his best game last night. He's not just a deep receiver. He has that deep speed. He has that deep ability. But he's able to, as he's perfecting his route tree, he's able to beat NFL defensive backs, starting defensive backs on intermediate routes, making plays after short catches. And he's just, I love his effort too. When he's out there, he's not giving up on a play. He's not rounding off his patterns. He's continuing to run through the route. He's everything, he's doing everything you want to see happen in a young developmental receiver. I don't know if he'll ever be a number 2 wideout in this league. But as far as from here on out, we need to see him because barring a biblical miracle, and that the biblical miracle is that Tampa Bay has to lose every single one of their games, Carolina has to drop 1, and the Saints have to win every single one of their games. So folks, I suppose there's still a chance, but I call that a biblical miracle. So at least we can be thankful for last night's game because it put us out of our playoff misery. And at that point, what are you going to do? You're going to get, if you're smart, you're going to give people like Rashid more looks to see what not if he could be a part of your team. I think that's been established, but how big a part he can be of your team going into the future. Because like I said, and I love the speed. I'm a track guy, so of course. But I love what his development has been as a receiver, as a route runner, just in the last 3 or 4 weeks alone.
Yeah. They have the conversation, who's better, who's going to be on the team next year, Deontay Hardy or Shaheed. Hardy is a kick returner who can do some things for you. Thank you, John. John Keating was the name of his character. I knew somebody would remember it. Actually, I do know a couple players came from Weber State, but yeah. Harding was a kick returner who can occasionally play receiver in some specialized packages, run the jet sweep and that kind of stuff. He is not a Steve Smith. He is not a Cheetah, a Tyreek Hill. He's not built that way. But clearly Shaheed is more of a receiver who can do kick returns. And to me, probably, and that would be entertaining. But to me, you are seeing that development as like you said, a complete receiver that can play kick returner on occasion. And he had some good kick returns last night too.
Oh yeah.
So he is probably one of the bright spots of this off season or this season. Caden Ellis once again had another good game. This is 4 in a row. This is a former 7th round draft pick. kind of a forgotten guy, and the light switches come on. So much so, they felt good keeping Pete Werner on the sidelines one more week. Alontae Taylor, another guy who his tackling bugs me because he likes to throw the big hit rather than wrap up and drive. But he has shown he can cover, and he's a hitter. I think he's probably going to take Paulson Adebo's spot on the outside.
It looks like it.
Yeah, and push Adebo to either the nickel or the bench. So there are, and Pete Werner we've talked about earlier this season. We haven't even missed him, and he was probably having one of the best seasons on his defense. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a lot of. There are some good pieces on this team. It's just a question. Ruiz, we talked about before too. Ruiz is probably having one of his best seasons. Olave, he's not going to be rookie of the year, but he's probably going to be in the running for it just because of how well he's played. Mm-hmm. But they won't pick him off of.
No, I think you're right. But yeah, I mean, Olave, and I wrote a piece about this, last week.
He's not.
By the time it's all said and done this year, Olave is going to break all of Michael Thomas's, Saints rookie receiving records, and those were good numbers, folks. I think Thomas had 92 catches as a rookie. Olave is not going to get that, but he's going to shatter. You're probably looking at a 1,200-yard season for Olave, which the numbers themselves are nice, but when you consider there's been no Michael Thomas since week 3, there've been all kinds of inconsistent messages at quarterback. Jarvis Landry missed 6 weeks and has been clearly a shadow of his former self. We already talked about Kamara's receiving, how poorly they've used him in that capacity. So really, Chris Olave has been your only bona fide receiving weapon in 2022, and he's still putting up these kind of numbers.
I think Marcus May, I think he's a much better run defender than how you're looking earlier. His coverage skills a little shaky, but that's okay as a safety. The weakness with the Saints is our free safety, the deep single high safety. I think that's going to be a priority for them next year to get safety in there. I thought now Malcolm Roach is back healthy. Shai Tuttle's picked up his game. Mm-hmm. Onyemata's kind of come around now. The light is kind of come on for him.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Cam and DeMario are still playing at an extremely high level. I don't know that we'll see. We're not going to see both in a Saints uniform next year. I hope we see at least one of them. But whatever happens with those two, you can't say that they have fallen off a cliff. They're still playing at a Pro Bowl level.
Yeah. You get flashes out of the other defensive ends. One thing that's frustrating, I watched Davenport a lot last night. Davenport was blowing people up and throwing people around, but he's not getting to the quarterback. Mm-hmm. He is a second late every time. He explodes off that line and is coming in like a bat out of hell. Then all of a sudden he slows up or stops just long enough for the quarterback to get rid of the ball. He is not finishing it. So he gets a pressure, but he doesn't finish the play.
Right. And I know we're both big fans of Granderson. He might not. He has some nice natural skills, but he's not the athletic freak that Onyemata or Davenport is. But he'll hustle from whistle to whistle on every play. I love watching Granderson play.
Yeah, so on the special teams, Gillikin is inconsistent. One play he is going to drop the ball inside the 5 and make you go 90 plus yards. Next one, he's kicking a 41-yard punt that's when you need, because they're backed up inside their 5, you need that booming punt, and he doesn't get it. He's not like Thomas Morstead, who was every time he went out there, he's flipping the field. You're not getting that consistency. And maybe I am judging him against Morstead, but the fact that Morstead's still kicking well, and we're not getting that consistency out of him, that's troublesome.
Yeah.
Will Lutz made all his field goals last night, compared to missing that one against San Francisco. And I get it, the turf's different, but at the same time, you need to be consistent. Somebody had made the joke that Lutz better be thankful Sean Payton's not coaching this team, because they had to kick a tryouts on Monday, just to put him on notice. And that's some of the accountability we've talked about with the coaching staff. What do you attribute to this defense suddenly beginning to turn it on and playing like how we expected them to play in week 1?
I think they got pissed. Some people will point to injuries, and I know May missed a few games early on. But Davenport, up until those 2 games, he was relatively healthy. So no, I do not think that the early season struggles had anything to do with injuries at all. I just thought it was due to lazy play. Lazy play really on all 3 levels. But the defensive tackles and Tyrann Mathieu especially were gaping holes. And I think the defense as a whole, they got pissed, and really, without trying to break it down strategically, I don't think I think it had very little to do with that. They just got mad at themselves, at each other, maybe at the outside world. I don't care, but they've been playing like that the last 3 weeks, and like you said, like the unit that we expected to see from the onset of the year. Now we're still seeing Tyrann Mathieu play like an 80-year-old man. We're still seeing on 4 different occasions last night. I saw Bradley Roby give up extra yardage because he was trying to strip the ball rather than just get the guy down. He's not going to be credited for a broken tackle because he allowed himself to be drugged and was still in on the stop. But he didn't fundamentally wrap up and bring the guy down because he was trying to create a play. Debo's pass interference at the end of the game, that I realize that's awful, and that's an awful play on his part. But even he's playing better. This team, they could have used Marshawn last night, but this defense has done what they've done in the last 3 or 4 weeks without Lattimore and without Pete Werner. So I think that they're finally flexing the depth that we thought that side of the ball had. And a lot of those are young players too. I know we mentioned DeMario and Cam, but a lot of the other ones, they're young players either in their prime or coming into their prime. So I still think the defense, if you're going to look, hang your hat on something for 2023, even though there's always going to be some personnel movement, the defense still has a lot of exciting pieces there.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason that they felt comfortable, he's missed 8 games, but I think part of the reason they felt comfortable leaving Lattimore on the bench again this week is the rise of Taylor playing as well as he is. That they're afraid to move him to the other side and make that call and put Lattimore there. I think they want a couple of weeks where they can really sit there and examine this roster and make some moves. And, I think now that they're out of the playoff race, is this the time where they decide we're going to start pinning now at left tackle? We're going to maybe do a couple other things on defense where we have Lattimore and Taylor out there now, and PJ Williams might be back. So we're going to move Mathieu to the nickel corner and probably put PJ back there with, because I did see he's come out of the doghouse. I saw Justin Evans sighting, but Justin Evans is basically a slower version of Marcus May.
Yeah.
Right now. So he's more your special teams guy. But I think you may see some roster evaluation movement now. I still feel good about them beating Atlanta. I watched the Atlanta game on Sunday. Atlanta found more ways to lose again. So it was frustrating that, here once again, you've got as bad of a NFC South that you have. You got it laid out in front of you. You just can't take it because you're just not good enough. Your stars are not making the plays they need to make. Okay, some injury news happened this weekend and last weekend, or a few weeks ago. It turns out Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. They thought he had a Lassafrank. I'm going to butcher that word, but they thought he had a foot injury, and they thought he was going to be lost for the season. They're now saying he may be out only 7 weeks. Well, that's 2 weeks into the playoffs. So
yeah.
Do you think that they're going to try and go after a free agent quarterback, or do you think they're going to try and do? I don't know. I don't think they're going to keep Winston. I think Winston's done. His time is done as a Saint. I'll be surprised if Winston ever takes another snap again as a Saint starting quarterback. Only because I just don't see. At this point, I think the relationship is so strained that even if Dennis Allen gets fired, I can't see another coach coming in and going, you know what, you're going to be my guy this year.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see it happening. And I don't think Allen likes Winston, wants Winston as a starter. So that's just how I see it. So where do you see, because, we've, outside of running back, I think quarterback and then safety are the 3 biggest things they have to address this offseason with new bodies. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, and I'll throw in defensive tackle too. That the unit has played poorly. Plus, Onyemata, Kentavis Street, and Shai Tuttle are all free agents. That's a conversation for another time. Quarterback. Jameis Winston has gotten a raw deal this year. In the media and from Dennis Allen. Whether you agree with me or not, I don't think there's any question that you're 100% accurate, Alan, that Jameis Winston has at the very least played his last down of football as a New Orleans Saint. If Allen comes back as the coach, as nauseating as that is, I still think it's a possibility. DA has made it very, very clear that she doesn't want Jameis Winston behind center.
Yeah.
If it's another guy that they bring in as a coach, well, you're talking about attaching your livelihood to the quarterback position. A coach is going to rightfully want his guy, whether it's a draft pick or a certain free agent, whatever the case may be. He doesn't want to inherit a guy, especially a guy that's going to come with the baggage of a couple losing seasons or a losing season and the turnover reputation that Jameis has. It's too much of a risk. All those things. Plus, I know Jameis signed a 2-year deal this offseason, but as I kept telling people after the contract was signed, I said it's a very team-friendly deal. And what I meant by that was if Winston played lights out, they still had him under contract to negotiate a long-term deal. If Winston stunk up the joint, and he didn't, he perhaps was on his way to do so, but we'll never know. But if the Saints were going to give up on him after a year, like we're looking at, then they could release him, cut him without too much financial penalty to him. I know the deal was, I think, for 2 years and 28 million, but 14 or 15 of that million of that was guaranteed money. So he got up front and not against the cap for 2023. So it's a very easy out for New Orleans. I still ultimately think that this team will juggle whatever they need to juggle to draft a quarterback, whether it's sitting tight, with what we think is going to be a high number 2 pick, and grabbing a guy like a Hooker that might drop, whether it's packaging a high 2nd round pick and a 2024 first to get into the middle of the first to get a guy like the Kentucky kid, or maybe Richardson from Florida, who should not have declared, but nonetheless, to grab a guy in the middle of the first, or if you get a 1st round pick for Sean Payton, and that's not a done deal, you'll get draft picks for Payton. Don't assume it's going to be a 1st rounder, folks. That's another story for another time too. But if you get a couple draft picks for Payton that you could package, and Calvin, I agree, that you could package to move up into the top 10 and grab a blue chip quarterback. Mm-hmm. That's what I ultimately think is going to happen. But I can see Garoppolo, I can see Derek Carr. One of those 2 guys could very well, very, very well be a New Orleans Saint. They're both still young guys, late 20s. They both played for winning teams, helped winning teams, not just tug along for the ride. And they both could lead you, could be a legitimate playoff quarterback. So while I do ultimately think, Alan, that they'll draft one in 2023, I also would not be surprised if Garoppolo or Carr end up in New Orleans.
Yeah. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if both happen. That they sign a Garoppolo or sign a Derek. Well, Derek Carr, if they make a trade for him, they probably wait at least a year to draft a quarterback, because that's going to cost them something.
Right.
If they get a Garoppolo, I can see them drafting a quarterback because of Garoppolo's free, and also because they've got one eye to the future,
right.
And they're assuming that Garoppolo's can at least get them at 500, where they can start building other pieces to this team. Mm-hmm. I think they have a lot of decisions to make next year, and they're already over the cap. Not that really matters with, Mickey Loomis, and they can juggle money around. But I mean, when we talked about why they didn't bring back Marcus Williams, why they wouldn't pay C.D. Deuce, why they wouldn't go pay Armstead, those making because they've got so much money tied up in other players right now. So they sit there and they're looking at, okay, COVID made us restructure these deals. So now we've got so many of these contracts with big numbers all hitting together at the same time. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to struggle for a little while and acquire a lot of draft picks to start filling out the bottom half of our roster and the depth of our roster with cheap rookie contract players. And, I don't know. I don't know if the fans have the stomach for that kind of rebuild. I really don't.
Not the young ones, not the ones that have not had to suffer pre-Sean Payton. They don't. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised by the intensity of the anger people have about the way the Saints are right now. I mean, during the Ditka years, people were angry, but they also were like, so be it. I'm not watching these guys play. These people, and granted, it's social media. Mm-hmm. These people are pissed. I mean, it's like this Mickey Loomis and no, I shouldn't even say Mickey Loomis. Dennis Allen shot their dog on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
You know, that level of anger, and it's hard for me to understand it because this isn't one of the worst teams I've ever watched. It's frustratingly bad because
It
you're
might be
seeing
the most frustrating team from beginning to end. But I can't even say that. You know what? And you and I have had conversations about this before. Dennis Allen might be the worst coach since Ditka, but this team doesn't remind me of those Ditka teams because they had no talent. It reminds me of the Hazlitt teams. Where you just look at the raw, you look even now. I look back at those Jim Haslett rosters. How the hell did they not win? People are going to look 5, 6, 7 years down from now back at this team and say, "How the hell did they not win?"
You know, and the Haslett teams are the right comparison because, you know, I think about 1 week. I think these were back-to-back games. In fact, I'm almost 90% sure these are back-to-back games. You know, here we are. We play the Giants. Aaron Brooks throws 6 touchdown passes, beautiful rainbows. That's a cell phone game, Joe Horn cell phone game. And then the next week, they play the Jaguars, who suck, in Jacksonville. They look terrible until the River City relay. You know, and then they missed the extra point and, you know, that kind of stuff. And it's just, that's what was frustrating about those Saints teams because you never knew what you're going to get week to week. 1 week, they looked like legitimate playoff teams. We're probably going to win the division. Next week, they look like they'd never played organized football in their lives. You know, I think this team doesn't look like that. This team just finds different ways to blow it, you know, and I think that gets frustrating. But yeah, Calvin, I agree. It's fans. You know, you go back and it's been. I have a game on, and it was back there earlier, a Tampa game from 2002, 20 years ago. The opening weekend against John Gruden's, you know, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that was a game that the Saints looked great and won the game, and they swept the Bucs that year. And in between there, you have a lot of frustrating losses of games they had no business losing. You know, Deuce McAllister's rushing for 1,000 yards. Joe Horn's 1,000-yard receiver. But, you know, they go from 2nd and 2 to a false start and a holding penalty. Now it's 2nd and 20 or 2nd and 22. You know, and then Aaron Brooks tries to throw a screen pass, and that doesn't work. So it's now 3rd and 22. They run a draw play with Deuce, get 7 yards, time to punt. I mean, just that kind of stuff. Okay. Is it better to keep Michael Thomas on the team? I read somewhere the dead cap hit is almost equal to keeping him on the roster. It's not that high, but it's high. Because you've restructured Thomas's deals and pushed it towards the back end, you know, you're stuck with him for at least another year.
Yep. I'll tell you, and yeah, these are the names to watch this offseason. These are the veteran names that are going to be thrown around, as far as who they're going to get rid of, who they should get rid of, etc. Andrus Peat, Michael Thomas. I'm throwing this one out. Alvin Kamara, Ryan Ramczyk, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Marshawn Lattimore. Tyrann Mathieu is not going to be a Saint next year. There's zero cap hit to cut him, so done deal. Goodbye. I'll come help you pack your friggin' bags, as a matter of fact.
Jarvis Landry, too.
If they cut, this is according to Spot Track, cutting Michael Thomas or trading Michael Thomas, you save $16.4 million in 2023. But then you get hit with, that's not a direct saving because you get hit with an 11.8 million cap hit. So really, in other words, you're saving about $5 million on your cap in 2023, but you get hit with to your point, Alan, you get hit with a 13.7 million cap hit in 2024. Why? Because they keep pushing those contracts down the road. And people are going to want to crucify Loomis for doing that, but nobody wanted to do, nobody was criticizing at the time because they were doing it to keep these players here, to reshuffle that money, to stay under the cap, to bring in new players. A great example, David Onyemata is an unrestricted free agent, one who I do not think will be back, but that's another. We always do a postseason wrap up here.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not David Onyemata is a New Orleans Saint in 2023, he's going to cost $10.7 million against their salary cap because he was one of those players that they pushed down the road. Ramczyk, they're going to be paying Ramczyk till 2028. Drew Brees finally comes off the books in 24, I believe.
No, this
maybe
year.
Next year, but I think it was at 24.
No, it's this year. He came.
Okay.
12 million was the last figure he had for this year.
Okay, but that's 2 years after he's done playing.
Retires. Yeah. And the reason why, before people get really mad about this, the reason why all these cap hits are coming together now is because you had to shave $150 million off for COVID for 2 years. If COVID doesn't happen and you're still going at your regular pace, Michael Thomas probably becomes a free agent next year.
Right.
And you don't have a cap hit for him.
Right.
David Onyemata probably doesn't have a cap hit because he's a free agent. But you have to figure out how I'm going to clear money so I can draft, number one. But number two, I can get under the cap. The only way I can do that is to push this money into dummy years.
Yep.
And that's what they did. That was the only way they could do that stuff. So we're having to pay the piper because we had 2 years of a flat or slow growth cap compared to what you normally would get with these television contracts. And that's what you can't plan against that. When I'm signing Eric McCoy to a deal, okay, I'm signing this anticipating this cap based on the history of the cap's going to go up this much the next year, this much the following year, and it's going to keep growing. And I can space out my contract that way because I know, okay, who else do I have? And this is why they didn't sign Marcus Williams and CD Deuce. Who else am I going to have come up as free agents here?
Right.
Where are these contracts going to fall? How long of a deal am I going to give a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? I want him to be my nickel safety. I'm not going to pay him a whole heck of a lot. So I'm probably going to give him about a 3-year deal because that's about how much longer he's going to be in this league. Oh, wait. I'm going to have McCoy hitting the 4th year of his deal. Right when CD Deuce's contract is hitting its biggest number. I'm going to be in trouble if I've got somebody else I'm going to be paying, which is probably Olave at that time.
Right. Olave, Alontae Taylor, Trevor Penning. We'll have Olave and Penning will both have 5th-year options by 26. But that's the way these guys think when it comes to the salary cap.
Exactly. That's the way you have to think. You're playing, the joke is you're playing 3-dimensional chess, but you are, because you have to constantly analyze where are these contracts going to fit. Who is going to be reaching a certain age where we want to get rid of this guy? We're not going to want to keep this guy around anymore. Demario Davis, like you said, is approaching that number. Quan Alexander approached that number already. That's why he's down on his roster. Darren Sproles, as frustrating as it was to see him go,
not for me, but I get it.
In their mind was, he's hitting that number. We're going to have to make a decision on him. We're going to let him go. Carl Nix, they made a decision. I'm only paying one offensive lineman top dollar, and that's Jari Evans, who's probably going to go in the NFL Hall of Fame. They lucked out, and it sucks for Carl Nicks, but they lucked out that Nicks ended up injuring his foot. Yeah, his toe. MRSA. Yeah, over in Tampa. So he never that didn't come back to haunt them, and it looks like a smart decision, But yeah, this is the way they have to look at the cap.
Yeah, and we'll go back to Kamara. Kamara will be a 28-year-old running back next year. Mm-hmm. A 28-year-old running back facing probably a 4 to 6 game minimum, 4 to 6 games NFL suspension. That you would save $6 million if you cut ties with them. And they're not going to cut Alvin Kamara. Do not get me wrong. They're not going to cut Michael Thomas. We're just talking if they're listening to potential trade offers, and they will. Mm-hmm. You're talking about to your point, Alan. If you're playing that 3-dimensional chess game, if you're looking the proverbial 2 to 3 moves ahead, Alvin Kamara is signed until 2026. He's going to be a 30-year-old running back. 30-year-old running back that can't run inside. Mm-hmm. Are they going to keep Alvin Kamara until 2026? I'd bet probably not. So when do you move him? When do you get an offer that's going to make you say, you know what? I can recoup 3 or 5. I could get 3 or 4 players in here, draft pick wise, cheaper for what I'm paying Alvin Kamara. Those are the kind of tough decisions that NFL executives have to make. But those are exactly the kind of tough decisions that are going to be facing Mickey Loomis and the Benson family this offseason.
I don't think they can do that. I mean, that would be a tough deal.
Yeah.
Here the thing with Sean Payton, and this is how you have to look at these things. Who's going to want him? Number one. Okay. So let's just, in the last couple minutes here, let's just look at this right now. Well, this is not the NBA, but yeah, that would be interesting to do that. Who's going to want a guy like Sean Payton? Well, the Chargers, that's been my favorite since before the season started.
Yep. Okay. Chargers and Cardinals have been my 1A and 1B since the season started.
Yeah, the Arizona Cardinals is another team. Dallas is always going to be hanging out there, no matter how successful Dallas is. I mean, right now people are saying if they don't win the NFC Championship game, Mike McCarthy is a goner. I don't know if that's going to be true. I think if they go one and done in the playoffs again, then we might be talking about that. But if he is done, you can hate on Dallas all you want, but Mike McCarthy is not the reason why they're going to lose so far. They are playing above their heads.
Yeah.
But, Carolina, I don't see that happening, but Carolina is looking for a coach.
Indianapolis is going to make a run. I know people think I'm crazy, but they're going to. I don't think they'll get him. They're going to make a run.
Right. But, okay, so let's stop at those. Those Denver and Indianapolis. We'll stop at that because there are a couple other teams that will probably be looking for a coach too. What do those teams have to offer the Saints? Because I know Sean Payton is going to say, okay, I want to go to, say, the Chargers, the Cardinals, or I don't know, Indianapolis, although I don't have Indianapolis really in there because unless he can draft a quarterback, he wants to go to a team that's already got a quarterback established and he can do something with. But let's just say it's those 3 teams. Okay. What are those teams going to be willing to give up? The Chargers not picking in the top 10. The Cardinals may be. The Broncos definitely, but we're not talking about that. Indianapolis will be.
Sorry to interrupt you. Take the Broncos off the table right now because remember they traded all their draft picks for Russell Wilson, so you don't have anything to get Sean Payton with. Exactly.
That's how I'm feeling about that team too. But that's where I'm going with this. So, what team can afford to trade away their first-round draft pick for Sean Payton? The Chargers maybe,
Yeah.
because they really have a lot of talent there. They got a lot of salary cap room. They probably could afford to trade a first round pick for Peyton, because they feel like they're really just a coach away from turning that team around. The Cardinals may not be. The Cardinals have some needs.
And an aging defense too.
Yes.
That's the key there.
The Cardinals are a team that's more likely to say, look, we'll give you a couple of twos. We might give you a player, you know, and it's going to be space. Maybe we'll give you a 2 this year and a 1 the next year. We might do that, you know. So, you know, that's where you have to start looking. And same with Indianapolis. Indianapolis is we can't afford to give away our first round pick. We have no quarterback.
Right.
You know, so we need that first round pick to draft a quarterback. So we don't have very much to offer you.
Well, and this is what people don't understand, aren't taking in either. Sean Payton has a say in where Sean Payton goes. And yeah, you bring up a great point about the quarterback, and I agree with you. But yeah, do you think Sean Payton is going to sit there and say, he's going to look over your roster? We'll say the Cardinals for argument's sake. He's going to obviously look over their roster, and he's going to see Kyler Murray, and all right, I can do some things with that. He's going to see all kinds of weapons at wide receiver. Okay, they're going to make my quarterback better. He's going to see they have a good young secondary, the Cardinals do, and a couple of athletic linebackers. But like you pointed out, an aging defensive line and a ripped up offensive line. So okay, Sean Payton. Well, I got to fix those. Well, how do I fix them? Obviously, how much salary cap room do we have? That's one way. And draft picks. Well, if this team has a top 10, 8, 10, even 12 draft pick, but you're going to give it away to get me, then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yes.
That's why ultimately I think the deal for Sean Payton will probably be a high 2 or a high 1 or a low 2 combined with a high 2024 pick. Because again, Sean Payton's going to say, well, I'm coming here to win. So we're going to have, draft picks in the 20s. The team that trades for him is going to say, well, we're getting Sean Payton to win. So we're going to have draft picks in the 20s. That 2024 first round pick becomes a whole lot easier to throw around than a high 2023 draft pick that we can couple with a new shiny coach in Sean Payton and a bright shiny quarterback and a Justin Herbert or a Kyler Murray. That's why I've thought all along I would, unless you're talking about a team with 2 first round picks, I would be surprised if the Saints got a 2023 first round pick out of Sean Payton.
Yeah, especially the teams that need it. And I've also been leaning towards the Chargers for a long time, aside from the fact that I'm a closet Chargers fan, going way back to the Aero Coryell days. But I've been leaning towards the Chargers because the Chargers are the Clippers right now. They're the ugly stepsister to the Rams, and the Rams don't really have fans, but that's the team the league promotes. So
and it's the LA market too. So.
Yes, what better way to turn the Chargers from the Clippers to being a legitimate team than to get Sean Payton out there, and he's going against Andy Reid twice a year. He's going out there and he's filling that stadium with Charger fans. And he's got an exciting offense out there with Justin Herbert, those receivers. He's got something going on. That, to me, that's the appeal. And he gets to build a program with a lot of established pieces in place already. Arizona, that's appealing. But Arizona, you're playing in the NFC West. You're still the ugly stepsister, just like you were in the NFC East when you were the St. Louis Cardinals, because it's all about the Cowboys, the Giants, the Eagles, the Redskins. those are the teams that mattered. Even when, like we were talking about when we did the preview of the Cardinals, that they have no coach with a winning record. They don't have that organization, that history. The Chargers. There's so many things that are appealing to him, and it's the LA market. So you're in a major market now. So now you have endorsements and things like that. I can see why that would be appealing to him. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be, if you get a booty for Peyton, it's going to be, you're going to get these players. I mean, you're going to get these picks this year, but you're going to get a chance to get better picks the next year. So you might get a 2 and a conditional 1 that turns into a 2. A conditional 2 turns into a 1 based on success that he has with your new team and everything else. So,
and folks, that's exactly what the Seattle Seahawks had in mind when they traded Russell Wilson, and it's working out for them pretty damn well. They're going to end up with a top 5 pick.
I'm really impressed with the job that Pete Carroll has done over there, and I'm not a Pete Carroll fan.
Me either. I hate the man.
But he has shown, in many ways, that he's almost a better coach than Bill Belichick, because Belichick has not been able to overcome losing Brady. You look at the Patriots, and the Patriots are probably the 4th best team now in the AFC East. Maybe even a 5th, maybe a 5th place team, because depending on the Jets, speaking of frustrating losses, did you watch the end of the Jets Vikings game? Did they go to
Yes,
that
I
game?
did.
Yeah.
That's the Jets jetting.
Yeah. You had opportunities to win this game because the Vikings are not that good. People talk about the Eagles being a paper tiger team. The Vikings really are a paper tiger team. That I don't accept that 9-2 record. So yeah, it's one of these things. These teams are getting exposed in the playoffs. They're going down in the playoffs.
Yeah, but and we'll talk about this another time. But exposed by who? Because San Francisco doesn't has Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback. I don't. Seattle probably goes to the playoffs, but I don't see them doing much.
Yeah.
Is it going to be? Is Dallas going to stop choking? Maybe, maybe not. But your top 3 teams are paper champions, or paper tigers, Eagles, Vikings, and chokers. Cowboys. So who's going to come out of it? It's going to be very interesting in the NFC.
Well, yeah, until Garoppolo got hurt, I really thought the 49ers had the best chance of going to the Super Bowl.
Me too.
Just because that defense is playing at that elite level. I got a friend of mine calling it the Dallas VCRs. That's what he refers to the Cowboys as. I don't know. I was surprised when the Carolina Panthers released Baker Mayfield, and I really thought that the 49ers were going to go after Baker Mayfield. And I also am not surprised the Rams and or the Seahawks were going to make a claim for him to keep him off the 49ers. But it's one of those things that I'm curious to see how these playoffs come about, because you told me, if you would have told me, what was it, 2017, Eagles lose Carson Wentz, Nick Foles is now going to be a starting quarterback. How is this team going to go? And they lose like their last 2 games badly. Now they're going to play in the playoffs, and they start their run in the playoffs. Who gets hot in the playoffs? That's where it goes down to. I know you're getting ready to smoke, and we stayed on a little bit longer than we should have. What's going on in the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night?
Alan, I'm going to try to stop Brendan from recapping the Tampa Bay game too much. He's been excited for this bye week show for weeks, because he wants to talk about the 2011 New Orleans Saints. How fun that season was. Just kind of do a fun, retrospective look. So yeah, and he reminded me of that again last night, and he said, so he goes, I figure we'll talk. Yeah, he bounces ideas off of me every week. He goes, what about we'll talk about half the hour with Tampa Bay, and then the last half with the 11 Saints. I'm willing to go 5 minutes talking about Tampa Bay and the other 55 minutes of talking about the 2011 Saints. But nonetheless, we're gonna have as much fun as we can. Looking back in the past. We have the next 2 weeks to relive this Tampa Bay game and preview preview the Week 15 opponent. So we're gonna try to have some fun tomorrow.
That 2011 team, I could go on for hours about that team because that was a fun team to watch.
Yeah.
The games they lost. You two of them you didn't even see this 2011 team coming out of that, and it started with that Houston game, and it just kept rolling. Sean Payton breaks his leg, so that's how Tampa wins. But by the time you got to this team in mid-season form, they were just annihilating people. I was at that Giants Monday night game. There you go. There you go, John. But yeah, I was at that Giants game in 2011 when they annihilated the Giants, and we just had so much fun because it was like pitch and catch out there. Once that machine got started, Jimmy Graham, Darren Sproles, peak Drew Brees, it was just so much fun, and that's what was so hard about the way it ended.
Yeah.
Because I was convinced that was our two-peat team, and especially once I heard the Giants had knocked off the Packers, and I said, we're going to get to play the Giants again in the Dome? This is going to be the most fun NFC Championship game I've ever been to in my life, and of course it was not meant to be. But it's a shame because, 2011 and 2018 are the two teams I felt like those were our teams that, and they changed legacies. And I think that's what we could talk about next week on the bye week. And rather than dwell on the 2022 teams, Sean Payton's legacy and how things were changed because they didn't win 2 Super Bowls.
Fair.
They put up some stat last night, but Tom Brady had thrown, 700 something touchdown pass. I'm like, yeah, if you play for 20 something years, I guess you do get to do that kind of stuff. Most of these quarterbacks had to retire by then, but anyway. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate you sticking with us. I really didn't want to spend a whole lot of time, but we ended up spending a whole lot of time talking about this Buccaneers game. I'd rather focus on the positive because social media is so negative right now. It's almost poisonous. It really is because it just feeds on itself.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk about positive things because there's a reason why we're Saints fans. We really want to enjoy football. And I'd rather focus on the good stuff. So thank you guys for joining us. I know Bob's ready to go smoke. He's got his jacket on and everything. And we'll see you next time Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.